Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to In the Right Direction with myself, Mickey, and
Stanley.
we are here for episode, 5 now? Oh my gosh. That's crazy how time flies. Episode 5, we're going to be talking about...
Religion and spirituality.
This is a subject I've been really excited to talk about with you, and...
But, Mickey, if you allow me, I want to do a postmortem on the last episode that we did on friendship.
yeah, I forgot, of course.
Because after we turned off the mic, sure enough, I had 2 or 3 more thoughts. So let me express them quickly. Friendship is something that comes up so often in the Bible, and so often it relates to rivalry between brothers. Goodness knows that's a really hot topic in the Jewish Bible. The other thing that occurred to me is that when there's a friendship between 2 people, it seems to me that almost always one needs the friendship more than the other does. And then what do you do with that? I know several people, including straight couples, for whom that is true. I believe that in one instance, the husband needs the marriage, otherwise friendship, more than the other person. And if that is the case, then the couple needs to, I believe, acknowledge it and deal with it. What do you think?
That's interesting, because it's so true. People definitely have an imbalance in their friendships often, especially when they don't take the time to evaluate the value that person's offering in their life. And I think that with relationships, specifically marriage, it's such a weird, bastardized kind of form of friendship, because it's the only friendship that is contractual, where
yes, that's right. It's official.
Friends, yeah, it's official. It's official friendship with government benefits. It's very odd, because I think that most people don't view marriages and relationships, romantic relationships, as friendships on their face. And I think that's maybe the fundamental problem in most people's relationships, is that they don't view them as friendships. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that people have an imbalance in power in their friendships. I mean, usually people say that the person who has the most power in a relationship is the person who cares the least.
Wow. Huh. That sounds kind of awful.
It does sound awful, but it's true. I mean, if you care less about the outcome or the ending of your friendship, then you're the one in power.
Yes.
The person who wants it more is obviously going to put more effort and work and care into maintaining it.
In my history, I was very often, too often, attracted to people who were the wrong person, who were the wrong guys.
They didn't invest enough into you?
They were not the right person. And I certainly cared more than the other person. Maybe the affair or the friendship lasted for a while, but inevitably it did not really last, because there was no equality there.
Yeah.
I needed it much more than the other person did. And that's, I think when it's that imbalanced, you might as well forget it.
Oh yeah, I've had a fair number of friendships end because I was putting in too much work. And then you eventually just come to the conclusion, you know what, this isn't worth it. I'm not getting out of this what I'm putting into it.
The subject reminded me, Khalil Gibran wrote this wonderful book called The Prophet, and it's full of advice. And one of the pieces of advice that I always remembered, he said, let your best be for your friend. I thought that was really lovely, and it is still lovely.
Let your best be for your friend.
Yeah.
I like that. My mom had a friend who, and when I was younger, I always thought that this was odd. My mom didn't like this quality about this friend. But this one friend, if my mom ever called and asked her if she could come and help her with something, or if she wanted to go and spend some time with her and do something, typically, or if she just needed her help with something, that friend would always say, I would, but I have to go for a run at that time, so I can't. My mom always found that really distasteful because they're prioritizing this, like going on a run over spending time with their friend, which I can see how people would prioritize, always prioritize yourself is important, yeah, but at some point I do think that being of service to your friends and to people who need you, especially when they have the confidence to say it outright that they need you for something, to say no to them is so you can do something like go for a run, which you can do at any time. It does strike me as selfish, and I think that with your quote, what is it again? May your best be for your friend.
Let your best be for your friend.
Yeah, I think that kind of strikes that chord where I've always been the kind of person who it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If my friend needs me and they ask me, drop everything. It's the most important thing you can do while you're on this earth is help people when they need it, because if you don't, they'll remember, and if you do, they'll remember. And depending on whether or not you believe in an afterlife or things that come after this, if you don't, then all that you have is the people who remember you and how they remember you.
I'm really glad that we talked about friendship. It's important to you and to me, and to lots of people. Anyway, today we're going to talk about religion.
Yeah, it's a good segue in, I suppose.
And I would like to turn the mic over to you.
To me? Okay. This is a really big subject to try and dive into, so I think we'll just do it. We'll do it very simply. Do you believe in God?
That's such a good question, and I ask that of myself. The way that I can answer that, I think, is to say that I am the sort of person that makes a silent prayer in the morning, and then again at night before bed, before sleep, thanking God for my life, for the day that starts and for the day that ends. I presume, therefore, that I do believe in some kind of higher power. Who else am I saying this prayer to? I'm not saying it to a neighbor or to a friend. I'm saying it to God. I was brought up, of course, in a quite religious family and congregation where, of course, we believed in God. The Lord is one, is the basic Hebrew prayer. So I guess my answer is I think so. I would like God to be a little more discretionary in what he does, so that, for example, the poor people of Ukraine today are suffering miserably in the war with Russia. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the prayers that I lately have incorporated in my own prayer, that the people of Ukraine should please be given peace once more. So that, anyway, what's your thought?
On God?
Yes.
I have had a very interesting, I think, relationship with God. I don't believe in God. I grew up Roman Catholic. My mom's side of the family is part Roman Catholic, and then another part is Byzantine Catholic. My dad grew up Jewish and then converted to Roman Catholicism when I was in middle school, and I went to Catholic school from the age of 5 to the age of 13. And I spent all those years, reading the Bible, learning all the prayers and all the stories, and I had a lot of questions to which I received very few answers, and oftentimes received a little bit of punishment for having asked the questions. I was kind of called the doubting Thomas of of my class. I remember a couple of times specifically that I had asked my teachers stories about Jesus in the Bible, and one in particular was the story of Lazarus, raising Lazarus from the dead. And my young, 9-year-old brain was trying to wrap my head around the idea of this person being risen from the dead, and the only way that I could make sense of it was that it only makes sense that Lazarus must therefore be a zombie because he came back from the dead, like zombies do. So I asked my teacher if Lazarus was a zombie, and I got detention, recess detention, for asking such a blasphemous question.
Wow.
And then
at age 9.
Yeah, I got a lot of that. A lot of how dare you question it. I remember one time in the same year, I think also in 3rd grade, our teacher, who was a nun, had said to us that one of the students' dog had just died, and so he asked the teacher if pets go to heaven, and the teacher said no, pets don't have souls like humans do, so no, she doesn't think that they go to heaven. And I said, well, then I don't want to go there, and I got detention for that.
I think your answer is brilliant.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, so I had a lot of issues with the idea of God, and then I came to the decision that I didn't believe in God anymore when I was 13. I went to a summer camp called Stage Door Manor in the Catskills. It was a sleepaway camp for acting, for theater, and I went to Catholic school, so I was taught my entire childhood that being gay was a sin and it was a demonic thing, and I, being a very imaginative kid, had like really intense, vivid imagery in my dreams and stuff about homosexuality and demon stuff. And I was 13. I went to this camp, and every kid was 12, 13 years old, flamboyantly gay, young boys. And I had never met anyone who was gay before. And the first 2 days, I was terrified because I was coming from this idea of like, these kids are doing something evil and demonic. And after 2 days, I became very close with one of the kids who was in my dorm room. And over the course of the 3 weeks, I became friends with all of these kids who I was told from a young age were doing something evil. And after that, I was like, these kids are just little kids. How could they possibly be doing something wrong? And if God thinks that this is wrong, then I want no part of God. And I that summer decided I don't believe in God. And after 13 years old, I have not changed my feeling about that.
What do you think about what I said about making a prayer without necessarily mentioning God, but somehow with the assumption that there is some kind of higher power?
I have... How do I feel about it? I mean, I think I pray in my own ways. I certainly believe that there are powers at be that are greater than us. I have a lot of reverence for faith and for religion. I used to hate it, all religions. I used to abhor them, and I read all about all of them because I was trying to figure out why I didn't believe in it anymore, and everyone in my family does. And I really didn't like them. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to see a sacred place or anything that had to do with it. Over the years, I've come to really appreciate what I learned from growing up Catholic and the value of prayer and intense meditative concentration on positivity, which I think is the same as prayer. So how do I feel about it? I think it's beautiful, and I wish that I had the ability to have faith, but I don't think it's something you can learn. I think you either like you believe it or you don't, and I don't.
I think that maybe one of the problems, for me at least, has been realizing that one does not have to take the Bible absolutely literally.
Yes.
And over the centuries, people have reinterpreted some of those stories, the Red Sea and so many others, so that they are more easy to imagine, to believe. But we were not taught that in the beginning.
Yeah.
Never. I went to Hebrew school until I was 13 and had bar mitzvah, after which I withdrew slowly. But goodness, we were never taught that it's just sort of a metaphor for something. You know, you don't, it's okay if you don't believe it literally. No, nobody ever said that. But I think ultimately that's the way that one can accept some stories and not expect them to be absolutely 100% literal.
I agree with that. I don't think there's any point in trying to convince someone not to believe in God because the stories in the book are hard to believe. I think that at the end of the day, we can all admit that the stories, the books were written by people, and the things that are in them are not proof of or proof against whether or not there is a God.
But you know, many of these stories give support and sustenance to many people. I know the Catholic Church definitely does.
Yeah.
There's a large emphasis on life after death. In Judaism, you don't get that. There's almost no mention of a life after death. A little bit, but very little. Whereas Catholics, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is what holds people to the church.
I think so. And I think that's another reason that I am hesitant to embrace those ideas is it feels like a coping mechanism as opposed to I came on really strong in the beginning of this because I have really feeling-based or emotional-based opinions about this. But if I can separate myself from the emotions that I have about it, I will say I do not think that there is no God. I wouldn't consider myself an atheist. I just think that there's no way to know. And I think that anyone who claims to know is making an assumption that I don't think they have the ability to make.
How do you feel about the idea of life after death?
So this is an interesting question. I've had this conversation with my parents a lot. My mom's dad died when she was young, and my dad's mom died when he was very, very young. And so when I talk to them about it, I have to be careful because I haven't experienced a whole lot of death in my life of people who were intimately close to me, immediate family members or very close friends or anything. And so when I talk about my opinions about life after death to people who have experienced death very close to them, they respond to me by saying, you know, you won't know what you really think about it until you lose somebody.
Yes.
And so I think that's true. So I'm hesitant to say what I really think about those things because they're all conceptual. I haven't experienced it, but right now, I don't believe in heaven or something like that. But I don't know. I'm too close to the beginning of the story of my life to speculate as to what happens later in the chapters.
You know, in the Jewish faith, when people are buried, and I have lived long enough to know a good number of people who are buried. There's a beautiful cemetery in Dallas. It began to be founded actually by my paternal grandfather as a Romanian cemetery. It later merged with a just plain Jewish cemetery. I have gone there many, many times. My parents are buried there. My grandparents are buried there. A couple of very loving aunts are buried there. Mm. And it's interesting because one of the traditions concerning cemeteries in the Jewish faith is that when you visit someone's grave, you leave a stone. You leave a little pebble from the ground, and you put it on their, what do you call it? On their stone.
Gravestone? Yeah.
On their
Tombstone?
Yes, on their tombstone. And you will go there and find some stones are so crowded with little pebbles that there's no room for any more. I guess that implies that those people who have gone on into some other life or world are cognizant of the fact that they have been remembered. Otherwise, what's the point of putting the stone there? In a way, I guess it kind of speaks of that person's popularity when he or she was alive. Oh, wow, look how many stones he's got.
It's a competition even
But,
after death.
but that's kind of chintzy.
I mean, I think that it's I was talking about this with my friend the other day. My friend Grant, whom I've mentioned before, his dad just died 6 months ago. Very unexpected. And he's obviously grappling with that loss. And I talked to him about it recently, about faith and if, this has changed his opinions about an afterlife. And he said something similar to what I believe, is that his dad lives on in tangible, provable DNA. That his dad is inside of him and his brothers, and if they have children, his dad will be inside of them. In their DNA, it's a real thing, and his dad was an architect. So in the town that they grew up in, I mean, his dad built so many houses and buildings in that area that his legacy is all around him. And Grant said that provides him so much more peace about the loss than any idea of a heaven or some place that he is now. He said that doesn't really help him. What really helps him is the idea that he really can see it and feel it. He looks in the mirror and sees it.
I find that interesting. For me, I had a very broken relationship with my father. I've come to realize that more and more since he's gone, and he's gone now several decades. But the curious thing is that as I have gotten older, I have gotten to be more and more just like him. I look in the mirror, and it almost scares me occasionally because I can see him. We look almost exactly alike. I have gone back to Dallas at times, a while back, where I would be going down the street and someone would say, "Oh, I bet you're Henry Eli's son," because the resemblance is striking. And it has been a challenge for me to try and smooth out the wrinkles that were in my relationship with him. It's a very complex story. I don't want to try and get into it. I know at the minimum that he loved me more than I loved him, as long as he was alive. And that's sad because he was not a bad father. He provided for his family very well, and he loved his family very well. So what do you do with that, huh?
I mean, that's. I don't want to pry. I'm very interested if you're willing to share. But when you see the resemblance now, do you find it like a comforting feeling, or not so much to see him?
I would say mostly comforting. Yes.
Yeah.
He was not a bad-looking man. So that's something. Yeah, I
like that.
And he was not a bad man either.
Yeah. How long ago did he pass?
Oh, it's several decades now. Yeah.
Do you feel that your experience of losing someone, especially someone that you didn't have a close relationship with at the time that he died, do you think it affected your faith at all, either positively or negatively, or more towards faith or further away from?
I think he was disappointed in that I withdrew from the basic tenets of Judaism because he did not. It was much more important to him all through his life than it has been to me. He was very close to his mother. He was a very dutiful son. But Judaism provides for those of us who are not the best believers in celebrating what's called the Yartzeit. Yartzeit being on the Hebrew calendar, the anniversary of the death of someone close to you. And it is a remembrance of that person. If you have belonged to a synagogue or a temple, they will send you a notice, and the notice will tell you that the Yartzeit for your whatever, father, mother, is going to be on April da-da, starting at sundown and continuing into the next day.
Wow.
And traditionally, you will do one or two or maybe both things. You will light a candle and say a prayer, a Shiva prayer, or you will go to the temple, or you'll do both. I do hear about the Yartzeit of my mother and my father and my brother being from Connecticut, on the Hebrew anniversary of their deaths. And I do get a small memorial candle, Yartzeit candle, and I light it. And I quietly, silently, or maybe not quite silently, but I have a prayer directly between me and that person to hope that the person is at peace and that I'm remembering him or her on this day. I think that, like with the stones on the tablets in the cemetery, it's a very lovely tradition.
Yeah, I think in terms of what I have learned from growing up Catholic, some of the most beautiful things about the Catholic faith, or most Christian faith, I suppose, are the traditions that I've learned to value through the religion. And I mean, I wouldn't trade my upbringing in Catholicism for anything. I think that the greatest values that I've ever learned came from Catholicism and from Catholics, and from Jews. Obviously, they're very similar. And despite what I feel about it now as a religion as a whole, I think that it is a really positive influence on the world. These religions, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like I'm so grateful to have grown up understanding these faiths. I wish I could be more a part of it. I just
I'm glad we're doing this, but I think we're running low on time.
Oh, let's see what time we're at. Oh yeah, you have like some sort of mental clock right when it hits 30 minutes. You always say it right at 30.
I think we extended the last session until this one, and we can extend this one to the next one.
True. All right, cool. Well then, I guess I will. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Should we put in a little commercial for ourselves about being on Spotify?
Sure. I mean, anyone who's listening to this, I suppose, already knows that we're on Spotify, because that's probably where you're listening to it. But yeah, we're on Spotify. In the right direction. Send this to anyone you think might be interested in it, because we're doing it so you guys can hear it.
Mickey, I like being here with you. I like you.
I like you, Stanley. I really like being here, and I'm grateful you let me spout off my 28-year-old thoughts at you once a week. See you guys next week.
Bye, everyone.